Next is going to be Adrian Jones of ShutDownRikers, who was at the rally for the 1-year anniversary of the death, or I should say murder, of Kalief Browder, who spent 3 years on Rikers Island at 16 years old for allegedly stealing a backpack, never tried, never charged, 2 years in solitary confinement, attempted suicide 5 or 6 times while in Rikers Island. He himself called Rikers Island a school for suicide. And that will be after this.
Nothing. It's been so lonely without you here. Like a bed without a song. Nothing can stop these lonely tears from falling. Tell me, baby, where did I go wrong? I can put my arms around every girl I see, but they only remind me of you. I went to the doctor, guess what he told me? He said, boy, you better try to have fun, no matter what you do. But he's a fool. Nothing compared. No, nothing compared to you.
Okay, here we go, calling Adrian Jones. Adrian Jones of Campaign to Shut Down Rikers.
Hello?
Adrian?
Yes.
Yay, thank you so much for picking it up on the first ring.
It rang twice.
Oh, less editing for me. So yes, you're with Campaign to Shut Down Rikers. Before I brought you on, I gave a brief summary of... yesterday was a rally at Columbus Circle in New York for the 1 year. It was actually, just yesterday, June the 6th of 2015, that Kalief Browder took his life after being on Rikers Island for 3 years, beaten by guards, inmates, 2 years in solitary confinement from the age of 16 years old, allegedly stealing a backpack, he attempted suicide a few times in Rikers Island, and Kalief himself called Rikers Island a school for suicide.
Right.
Thank you for joining me on Organic News on Awake Radio, Adrian. Were you there yesterday at the rally at Columbus Circle?
Yes, I was.
So, just kind of, talk a little bit about the tragedy that happened to Kalief Browder at Rikers Island and why you want to shut it down.
Well, you really went over the main points, but some things you missed were that his trial was postponed 30 times. They tried to convince him over and over again to accept the plea deal, even though he knew he was innocent, and he refused to. They never found the backpack that they charged him with stealing. So these are just a few of the things that the Justice Department does, the Criminal Justice Department does with us. They decide that, we're going to railroad them into a plea deal. The harder they are with us, the more that they can get from us. And it really broke Kalief. Yeah. Being in solitary confinement, the UN says that 15 days in solitary confinement is torture. Now, he spent 2 years in solitary confinement, so that's beyond torture.
I mean, it would be torture to anyone, an adult, anyone, that would be torture.
Right, correct. But what I'm saying is that the definition is 15 days. He spent 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's beyond torture.
Right.
So when you start magnifying what exactly went on at Rikers with him, you start, I heard the chants, and I was chanting as well. But, we went through facts over and over again. I went to actually two rallies, one at Columbus Circle and one that started at Grand Central Station. And we just kept talking about it over and over and over again. And you get a real... Not that I wasn't sad before, and I can tell you that in 2015, and I was probably following the story in 2014 when the New Yorker had covered him. But this sense of just almost hopelessness that this poor child had, because they're really doing a number on him. This is really torturous behavior. It's like one thing after another. The kid can't get a break. And by the time he came out, he had PTSD symptoms.
Right.
That's a lot.
And wasn't it? I read or heard somewhere that guards were like, egging him on to kill himself, saying like, go ahead and do it. And I mean, here he is. He's just 16, 17-year-old. I mean, like, these are not hardened criminals. I mean, even if they were, but and to just be saying things like that to just this young, innocent person.
Right, exactly. And he was innocent. That's the important part to really understand about the population at Rikers Island. The vast majority of them are innocent because they have not even been convicted of a crime. So we're talking about the minimum of 80% of people on Rikers have not been convicted of a crime yet.
Right.
So they're holding these people. They're treating Rikers as a prison when it's really a jail. That's number one. You're not supposed to hold people past 6 months. They have not been convicted of a crime. What is it? And the thing about it is he spent 3 years in jail for stealing a backpack. Some people only get 3 years in jail for manslaughter. And you have to start thinking about what exactly that they're doing to these kids.
And they want to give that protester Jasmine from Black Lives Matter in Pasadena 4 years.
Right, exactly. And the charge is what is the charge?
Oh, lynching, some kind of lynching.
Thank you. The charge is lynching. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. They're protesting in California today. I think her arraignment her sentencing is at 7 p.m. and they've collected over 50,000 signatures to stop them from giving her any time. I mean, it's bad enough that they charged her. We're sitting here trying to fight civil rights violations, really. Right. They're infringing on our rights daily, and this is a struggle. And this is and I'm proud of actually the younger population. The youth has really come out and said, we don't want this for ourselves, and we don't want this for our kids.
I mean, it's like just before you, for the first half an hour, I got an update to the Flint water crisis by Melissa Mays, and I just feel like it's really important. Like I have to point out the fact that even though the situations are different, the themes are all the same in that poor and vulnerable people are literally just being eliminated. And the people in power, are just clearly illegitimate. They clearly have an agenda that, that doesn't include us. And
absolutely.
It's just, it's out in the open. It's not hidden anymore. It's just abuse, and it's all about profit and whatever fills their jails, whatever. But let me ask you this question, because I think it was one of the facts that, posters, signs that somebody was holding up yesterday that had a figure of how much it actually costs to keep somebody in Rikers Island. And it's not even cost effective.
No, it's not cost effective. Let me see if I can find that exact number. But no, it's not cost effective. It's more than one person's salary. It's really unbelievable.
So,
we want them to invest in our communities. We want them to invest in our mental health. We want them to invest in our schools. We do not want them to invest in more jail. So, it's important to point out that the campaign to shut down Rikers is really not advocating a new jail system or more jails. As my comrade Nabil said yesterday, if they build more jails, they will fill it.
Right.
They will fill. We don't want them to fill more jails. We want them to stop these arrest of these young kids for minor infractions, and they can't get out of jail because they can't afford the bail. That's kind of crazy. So now this becomes an attack on the poor, like you said. So poor people have to stay in jail for these minor offenses, and it's costing the taxpayers money. Who says that we want to pay this money? I mean, nobody wants to pay this.
It's holding people hostage. I mean, it's literally like the system is like just kidnapping kids off the street and holding them for ransom.
Exactly. And it's a shame because in these areas, this is why the stop and frisk is so big, because all a kid has to do is be walking down the street and get stopped. And the next thing you know, if he resists the officer, now you're resisting arrest. But what are you arresting me for? Right. Why are you stopping me? What is the reason for this search? And they don't have to say. I mean, they're trying to reform that, but, they just had an article the other day about how the blacks and the Hispanics are still being targeted at high numbers. I didn't need them to have the report. We still know that. These things are going on right now in front of our faces. People are telling us this story. And this is the thing. Kalief could be any one of us.
Yeah. I mean, he was not a troubled person. I mean, he was like a good, decent, going to school.
Believe it, because if he was a troubled person, that's the first thing that they would have put in the newspapers. Hardened criminal arrested, spent 3 years and commit suicide. That's what that headline would have been. He did it to himself. Good riddance. All they have is that they arrested him for stealing a book bag that they never found. And then they put him in jail. That was a death sentence, really. That was really a death sentence. Because if you're not used to, first of all, if you're innocent, it's going to drive you crazy that you've been arrested for being innocent. So now you're arrested. Now you're in jail. Now they put you in solitary confinement. People are beating you. 2 years out of 3 years in solitary confinement. I mean, that's horrific. And it should not be allowed.
And what, I mean, first of all, he shouldn't even be in Rikers. So it's like they can't torture him enough by just the fact that he's in Rikers, and then they turn around and put him even further, into prison. By putting him in solitary confinement, and they put people in solitary confinement for literally nothing.
Right. I just have to make a point. This is jail, not prison.
Right.
Then they treat Rikers as a prison when it is a jail. And that's the major point. When we talk to people about closing Rikers, they all say, well, what are you going to do with the criminals? Well, most of them are not criminals because they haven't been convicted of any crime. So what we're going to do with them is not arrest them for petty crimes. What we're going to do with them is not breed breed criminals by making laws that say now your behavior is criminal. All over the country, you have these pull up your pants laws where they can fine kids or put them into jail for 30 days.
Are these? Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this is you criminalizing questionable fashion choices. This is really ridiculous. Now, if they were naked, that would be one thing. But who are you to say how these kids wear their clothes? It's really ridiculous. Now you're going to criminalize clothing, your wardrobe. That's just it's your sense of style now is criminal behavior, and this is what they do. So now you can't wear a hoodie. That's criminal behavior. Can't wear dark clothes. Can't wear sunglasses. You can't wear your pants off. So many things have become criminal behavior, and they call them thug behavior and thug wardrobe. And so just by looking at someone and saying, oh, you know what, there's a thug right there. just because they have a hood on, or there's a thug just because. But this is the fashion of today. Kids are wearing their pants off, and they go to school every day. They don't get into trouble. This is what they like to do. So now you're going to criminalize it, and the kid walking down the street who goes to school every day, does what he's supposed to do, he gets caught up for no reason. So they have to stop making laws that create criminals. Get what I'm saying?
Well, that's exactly like that. You know, like you just kind of made the point. Like they need to squeeze, you know, the public even tighter. You know, I mean, you know, because it's all about revenue. And I'm not going to use that word revenue generating because that is way too of a lenient term to use. I mean, what the system is doing. The system is the criminal. There's just no question about that.
Right.
And I mean, it's never ending lust for, profit. I mean, the criminal justice system is not supposed to be for profit, and everything is a business.
Right.
Governmental things, education, right? The justice system. I mean, water, everything is being privatized and turned into for profit. And
go ahead.
And if you could just distinguish between what you mean, the difference between jail and prison.
Well, prison is for those who have been convicted. Jail, most of the time, 90% of the time, just houses people before they get seen at court and get their sentencing.
So jail is
when
like
you're innocent, you're in jail. Right. Most of the time, 90% of the time, if you're innocent, you're in jail. So you're innocent until proven guilty. This is what I mean by innocent. Okay? So you've not been convicted of a crime at this point. You're in jail. This is a holding cell. We're holding these people until they can get their trial. Okay? So that's jail. So once they get their trial, if they're convicted, they then go to prison, which is when you hear people say, oh, I have to go upstate. They did a bid upstate. That's what happens. After they leave Rikers Island, if they get convicted, they have to do a bid upstate. They don't stay at Rikers Island. They move on. But that's what I mean.
Okay.
So the reason why I say don't say it's a prison is because you give the impression that these people are convicted, and they certainly are not convicted.
Right.
They are still innocent until proven guilty, and most of them, 90% of them, are black or brown. So, they're poor people, black and brown people that are in Rikers Island for the sole reason of not having enough money for bail.
Right.
And then, so, these are crimes for the poor. So that's really ridiculous.
So that's what I'm saying. So the point that you're making, I've made these points, but I got to keep making the same points over and over and over again to get the public, because a lot of people just don't want to believe that this stuff is happening. So poverty is now a crime. And innocence is a crime. Like you're a criminal and you're guilty for just being vulnerable, poor, and innocent.
Right.
Because the sociopaths at the top just can't get enough profit, and the people in the middle, like the guards, the police, the lawyers, judges, whoever else who doesn't have the guts to stand up to the people at the top, is of course going to get off on taking the their power, their abuse of power out on the most vulnerable people of society.
Right.
That's America with two K's.
Yes, that is America. I mean, so you think about the cops who have quotas, and the quotas are not just for traffic stops. So I don't want people to believe that these quotas are just for traffic stops. These quotas are to stop and frisk, to arrest people. And where are they arresting them? They're arresting them in the black and brown neighborhoods. That's where they're going. They're not going. So, black and brown people who have no money can't afford to do drugs all day and all night long. That's a myth. Okay? So we don't smoke as much weed as they do in other areas, because other areas they have money to do it. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we're stopped and frisked because they see us and they're looking for us, but they're not looking in the other areas, because if they did look in the other areas and stopped and frisked them, they would find weed on them. Right. They would most definitely find weed on them, but they don't do that. They come into our areas and they say, well, this is where the drugs are at. These are where the people do X, Y, and Z. And this is why we have a higher arrest rate. Never mind the criming while white. So they get caught, they get busted, and then they say, oh, you know what, we'll give you another chance. That rarely happens with brown and black people. We don't get second chances. You get caught, you're going to jail, because that's the only way that we can rehabilitate you. And that's the exact way that they feel. And it's unfortunate.
Rehabilitate?
I'm sorry?
Oh, did you say rehabilitate?
Rehabilitate, correct. You can't make a mistake and say, you know what, I made a mistake and I'll never do this again.
Right.
Because you need to learn in jail. That's what's going to teach you. And then when you look at how many of these criminals have been convicted of crimes and they're let go to their homes to wear those monitors, those ankle bracelets, because they can't stand jail. They wouldn't be able to handle jail. So what these judges are telling you is that the jails are not for these people. The jails are for these people. Because this guy's going to learn his lesson, and he does not need to be in jail. He needs to be at home not doing anything, and he'll learn his lesson. You, on the other hand, if you make a small mistake, how small, even if Kalief had stolen that bag, how small of a mistake is that he has to end up in jail for 3 years?
I mean, what was in it? I mean, you know.
Of course he didn't. He absolutely didn't. He absolutely did not. But the point is that when do you decide? Who decides that this is what you need? And this is what they decide. They look at you, and this is where your sentencing comes from. This is how the prosecutors see you. How would they try to railroad him into a plea deal over and over again? And how is it possible that they can postpone his case 30 times? That should be illegal. Someone should, I call it prosecutorial misconduct. It's been going on for years. I've been following the Central Park jogger case for years. In Central Park 5, those innocent boys were railroaded, and they still said that they were innocent, and they all went to jail, every last one of them.
I mean, yeah, that's...
Every last one of them.
I've interviewed 4 of the 5 of the Central Park 5, and... yeah, that's another really horrible story, because I used to be a big jogger when that incident came out, and all that talk about wilding and all, you know, and to think that none of it was true. Like, I mean, it's like it's all just fabricated. But we have a few minutes left. I wanted to kind of make the point, you know, when you were distinguishing between jail and prison, so that would actually qualify Guantanamo then to be a jail instead of a prison, because I think a lot of people call that place a prison, and a lot of times now it is also a jail, because there's a lot of people in there, right, who've never been charged, had any kind of trial or anything like that. And also...
That's it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I wanted to, the 2 protesters who have court dates coming up, and I think it's July the 12th, who got arrested during a ShutDownRikers protest, and they're looking at, I think, at least a year or so in jail for protesting ShutDownRikers Island.
Which 2 are you referring to? Because some of them were, they just went to court the other day, and they were given probation. So which 2 are you speaking of?
I think it's the manager from Revolution Books.
Okay.
And then one other person. I got an email from StopMassIncarceration.net that there's a couple of more. Oh, okay. So there were other protesters that they got. What did you say? They got probation?
Yes.
See, like, I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, again, so they're criminalizing what's your right. Your right to protest, you know?
They will criminalize you. I mean, so you can't speak out. If you speak out, then, you know, you are punished. I mean, so this is what I'm saying. So they have what is it, the resisting arrest law? So you resist arrest for no crime that they're trying to arrest you for, but you get in trouble for resisting the arrest that they have no right arresting you for.
Right.
And it's just, it's cyclical. These cops, they love criminals. You know why? Because it keeps them employed. Do you think that they're trying to stop people from creating crime? All they want to make sure is that nobody kills them. But more criminals means more money, means more overtime for them. It doesn't mean anything else to them. That's it. I mean, they don't live in our areas.
Yeah, it's pretty despicable when you think that all people really care about is the bottom dollar. I mean, a cop, normally people become cops because they do want to make a difference. I don't see how so many people can find satisfaction off of just criminalizing, innocent kids. I mean, I'm like that completely blows my mind. I mean, it's the epitome of cowardice. A
lot of them don't grow up in our areas. That's number one. So they see us differently. There's been reports and studies about how these law enforcement agencies use pictures of black and brown people for target practice. That's what they do, and it's not specific to anyone. They're just brown and black people that they have up there, and so now there becomes this. It's almost like an impulse. It's almost like Pavlov's dog. Here comes a black person. He must be dangerous, and let me shoot him. Because that's what it's beginning to feel like. Because how afraid could you be as a cop of a 12-year-old boy that's handling a toy gun?
Right.
Harambe the gorilla got more time than Tamir Rice.
Right.
What kind of business is that? Right. Like, it's really nonsense. How scared are you of a boy? Now, if anything, why jump out your car? Why not keep your windows closed and see what he's going to do?
Right.
What on earth would make you? So this is some type of. Either you just wanted to shoot the boy, or you just don't know how to cop, or you're just so scared. In either case, all three of those, you don't belong as a police officer.
But they created the circumstances for them to be scared.
Right. Correct. Absolutely. There's no reason to fear a 12-year-old boy that's that's standing still. There was no one even around him at this time.
Right.
So who are you afraid of? So now you're afraid of you're fearing for your life?
Right. It's like they drive up on him in 2 seconds, put themselves, in a situation, and then say that they were afraid.
Exactly. Keep your windows closed. I mean, anybody can see what's going on there. You had other options, but your first decision was to shoot at the boy, and that to me is terrifying. And this is why people are terrified. One of my girlfriend's daughters was saying on Facebook a few months ago how she's absolutely terrified. Because it's not only happening to boys, it's happening to girls as well. So you're walking down the street, and now you have to be afraid of the cops because they don't like what you're doing, no matter what it is. You could be singing, you could be talking, you could be walking. If they stop and frisk you, now you have to fear for your life, and that's not right. She's a law-abiding citizen that is afraid for her life, and it's all around. It's not just her. I'm afraid for my life. I'm afraid daily. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. So when I'm talking to people and maybe there's, some scuffle going on nearby, I could be the one that's tackled by the police just because I'm brown, just because I'm black. And that's just not right. I've seen it happen before. So there's a lot of fear going on about how these police are handling people. Like, you don't even have a chance to live. Yeah. And that's crazy. Too many women dying in jail under suspicious circumstances. That's crazy. And these are low-level offenses that they are arrested for, and they would get out of jail soon enough, and they're committing suicide. Something is wrong. All of these women are not committing suicide.
Yeah, that's
my thing.
It's terrifying. We have like 1 minute left. And on the ShutDownRikers website, there are 7 reasons to shut down Rikers. 1 is Rikers is racist. 2 is Rikers punishes poor people. 3 is Rikers breeds physical and sexual violence. 4 is Rikers abuses children and people with mental illness. 5, Rikers acts as a prison, not a jail. 6, Rikers is a waste of public spending. 7, Rikers is a torture chamber. Please check out the petition and to shut down. It's hashtag ShutDownRikers and prevent more people like Kalief Browder. Right. The system makes people criminals. It makes people mentally ill. It makes and creates terrorists.
Correct. So the point is that this is not an isolated incident. He is just the highlight of how this campaign got started, but it is not an isolated incident. There are many more Kaliefs out there.
Thank you so much, Adrian Jones from ShutDownRikers campaign.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, so after this quick music break, the next guest also, I was trying to keep the theme of Kalief Browder and the out-of-control criminal injustice system, will be Sandeep Kandari of the Legal Aid Society. He's the director of the Community Justice Unit, and I interviewed him yesterday at the rally, and we're going to talk about pleas and this idea of in order to get out, you have to plead guilty. So please don't go away.
Nothing. In the backyard, all died when you went away. I know that living with the baby was sometimes hard, but I'm willing to give it another try. 'Cause nothing compares. Nothing compares to you.
Again, today would have been Prince's 58th birthday. Moving on to the next guest. Sandeep Kandari.
Hello.
Hi, Sandeep. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for being able to join me on Organic News on Awake Radio to talk about the ShutDownRikers rally yesterday, and it was also the 1-year anniversary of the, I don't know what to call it, death, murder of Kalief Browder.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited it's sad that it took Kalief's death and passing for us to have this conversation, but it's a very important conversation, and I'm glad to be involved.
Yeah, me too. And, we had a pretty interesting interview yesterday that, it kind of lasted a bit longer than my intention was. It was like a good 6 minutes, but we covered a lot of points. And I'm actually, putting together an article on Hot Indie News that I'll get back to and finish up as soon as the radio show is over. So you were talking about yesterday, first of all, why is a 16-year-old being charged as an adult, which Kalief Browder was?
Well, he was charged, he was charged as an adult. So a little bit of background for those who are listening. I work for the Legal Aid Society. I'm a public defender, and now I'm the director of the Legal Aid Society's Community Justice Unit. And so our unit goes around to different communities and tries to provide access to legal services. But my background is I was a juvenile defense attorney for most of my career at the Legal Aid Society. And so I've actually represented children, youth, in court who are accused of committing crimes or acts of juvenile delinquency. And so that meant that they committed the alleged act before their 16th birthday. But it was the most arbitrary thing when I would see that, on their 16th birthday, suddenly they're going to criminal court and having much greater and much harsher penalties for the exact same actions. And nobody in our society would deem a 16-year-old an adult. And nor would they deem a 17-year-old an adult. There's no other areas of our legal infrastructure where a 16, 17-year-old is treated as an adult. They can't buy cigarettes. They can't go to the armed forces. We have a statutory requirement that 17-year-olds are to remain enrolled in school, but our criminal injustice system treats 16, 17-year-olds as adults. It's so backwards. And
whatever serves their purpose, it's like, right, you're 18 when they want you to be, but you're 15 when they want you to be.
Yeah, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any clear social benefit to treating 16 and 17-year-olds as adults. Every modern study, neurological study, sociological study shows that first brain development continues through your early to mid-20s. And so 16, 17, your brain is so different than an adult's brain. And then sociologically, 16 and 17-year-olds are still learning how to be adults. And so the issues with adolescence are you're so much more peer motivated and peer influenced. And so you end up making a lot more decisions based on peer pressure that you don't make when you're 26, 7, or 8. And so that's why we have different standards for children. And that's why we should be treating 16, 17-year-olds as children. And the juvenile delinquency system, that's in family court. And so those records, they don't follow you for the rest of your life. You don't have forever consequences in terms of a criminal record when you commit an act of juvenile delinquency or found guilty of an act of juvenile delinquency. But at 16, bada bing, bada boom, this could be held against you forever. Now, there is this youthful offender statute that I don't need to get into here, but that's really not the point here. The point is we shouldn't ever have considered 16, 17-year-old adults. And the only issue right now that's stopping us, the only reason we're not treating 16, 17-year-olds as children is Albany. And our politicians are frozen and too scared and too paralyzed from doing the right thing, even though if you polled anybody, any community, they would all agree that we need to raise the age of criminal liability.
And it's also, their actions and what they do aren't even necessarily crimes. I mean, especially because, even if a young person of 16 years old, like some weeks back, it was also some lawyers from the Legal Aid Society that were rallying outside of 350 J Street for the, what happened with the Akai Gurley case and no jail time for Peter Liang. And yet, I interviewed one of the lawyers that were there, and they said that, they'll give a 16-year-old a year in jail for jumping a turnstile for $2.75, but yet no jail time for Peter Liang.
So, the issue that I kind of take out of the Peter Liang case is disparate treatment. So the other elephant in the room, but there's actually many elephants in the criminal and justice system, the disparate treatment of different people, of different demographic groups and different social positions is a clear problem. We do not have uniform enforcement or application of the law. So you see a police officer commit manslaughter, commit a homicide, and he doesn't have to do any jail time, whereas a staff person, just take off the uniform and make him a young black man, and he'd be doing years and years in prison, right? And so you see that because he was a police officer, he's getting disparate treatment. And so I personally find it a slippery slope and a dangerous slope to start asking for harsher penalties for more people. What I want is equal enforcement and equal application. And so I think we could talk about it if you think it's appropriate, just like the Stanford case that everybody's talking about, the rape case that's in the news right now.
This is ridiculous.
A lot of people are up at arms that he only has got sentenced to 6 months in jail instead of getting sent to a prison. But I think what really happened was that judge saw somebody who could be his child or his child's friend and saw somebody who was bright and going to Stanford and he didn't want to ruin his future. Well,
God.
that's fine. I actually don't have a problem with that sort of logic in some ways. What I have a problem is then when you see a young black man, a young black boy, why don't you have that same compassion for his future? Why don't you want to protect his future and protect him from the trauma of being imprisoned and really consider where he could be going and how imprisonment for years and years could derail his life?
But this kid, he was like some swimmer, some athlete or whatever, the Stanford kid. I mean, he actually did rape someone.
Yes. Oh, he did. And he was found guilty of raping a young drunk college student and taking advantage of her. So he absolutely committed a felony and a bad crime. And so, but I think what I want and I always push for is greater compassion in our criminal justice system, not just limited compassion. So don't just go ahead.
I'm sorry, especially with the young. I mean, just going back to a 16-year-old jumping a turnstile and they want to give them like a year. I mean, come on. It's like a 16-year-old jumping a turnstile is like normal.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so disturbing that this is the conversation we were having is why does our penal system, why does our penal law allow somebody hopping a turnstile to even potentially go to jail for a year? Why did that get written? And then apply that to a young person, a 16-year-old. I mean, come on. Like, I see it all the time. I see people hopping turnstiles, and it doesn't affect our society. Yes, lost revenue for the MTA. There are greater issues. I'm not poo-pooing the behavior as acceptable, but I am saying that the consequences are so severe. Why isn't that just a slight ticket, like a parking ticket? Why should it be any different than that? Why is an arrestable a misdemeanor with potential year in jail and a permanent record? That's so disturbing that our legislature, which is failing us by not raising the age and is failing us by allowing a turnstile hop to be punishable by a year in jail, and then we have judges who will sentence people disparately. And so their discretion often gets used towards sort of more racist directions, right? They will be much harsher on black and brown people than they will on white people. And we just see study after study showing harsher sentences, higher charges, higher bail, just worse consequences for people of color than white people who are brought through the criminal justice system.
And I have to, because I listen to people speak, and then my mind is kind of just sort of like following, like where things are going, or like where things lead, or I guess follow the money kind of thing. And it took me to the Correctional Corporation of America, and just the for-profit prisons that are popping up all over the country. That like your friend said, I believe he was from the Million Man March, right? The young you mentioned his name earlier, and who spoke about if or was it you who it might have been the previous guest who mentioned him, and he said. If they build prisons, they're going to fill them, of course. I mean, what kind of...
I heard his comment.
Yeah, what kind of a direction is that for a country to want to go in unless it isn't clear what their agenda is, that it's all about the corporations and corporate profit, and the people are basically just chopped meat.
So, we had, especially in the 90s, and we still have it continuing, this rush and push for privatization of so many different public services and public institutions. And jails, just like the military, just like parts of our education system, different public institutions became privatized. And there should never be a profit incentive with jailing or imprisoning and incarcerating human beings.
I mean, this is
There should
insane.
never be any profit incentive to that. It is a social failure when somebody is incarcerated. It is a bad for everyone involved in society. Now, there are people who would argue, and I don't want to get into the argument, that nobody ever should ever be incarcerated. But what is very easy for me to say is many, many, many less people should be currently incarcerated. We, as America, I'm sure the stat is very, has said over and over again, we have 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's prison population.
Right.
It's an American syndrome to just imprison people. And we imprison poor people and poor people of color. And all of this, the profit incentive is really to use black and brown bodies to fill their coffers and to fill their prisons. And it's disgusting and it's unacceptable. And the fact that we've allowed it and the fact that we have legislators that don't have the will to fix it is a failure. It's a democratic failure.
I wanted to bring up, I might have mentioned it to you at the rally, but right after the rally for Kalief Browder and ShutDownRikers on the first Monday of every month, the No Separate Justice organization has a vigil down at 150 Park Row outside of the MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center. And yesterday they had it, and it was Torture Awareness Month. And one of the speakers, who is up in New York visiting from Florida, who wrote a book called Getting Away with Murder, his name is George Mallingrot, and he was a psychologist at the Dade County Correctional Facility. And don't quote me because I'm not exactly sure of the exact numbers, but I believe most of the people in the prison, I believe they all have some kind of a mental illness, and the fact that prisons are becoming storage facilities for the mentally ill, or actually it's like making people mentally ill, like Kalief Browder and many, many others. And so what happened, he kind of highlights the story in his book, Getting Away with Murder, the story of one inmate / patient of, his name, he was 52-year-old Darren Rainey, who a guard basically put in a shower stall of 180 degrees and scalded him to death and then covered it up. The whole facility knew about it, and they're covering it up. And if it wasn't for an inmate with obsessive compulsive disorders, is what they tag this person with, he's the one that was below Darren Rainey, and was so traumatized by this man's pleas for his life that he wouldn't let up, and he got, with the help of his sister from the outside, the Miami Herald broke the story, and then it kind of like went off from there, and Mr. Mallingrot wrote the book because he tried unsuccessfully to get the story out, as the other inmate, Harold Hempstead, was able to get the story out. It's really, I can't believe that this is what this country is today.
Well, I think you raise a very important point, and we don't have the proper infrastructure for people suffering from mental health outside of jails, or prisons, nor do we have the appropriate support when they're incarcerated. And so I think I read a recent study that 40% of the men and women in Rikers Island suffer from mental illness, and there's no significant mental health treatment that's offered in there. And then what happens is the other 60% are now surrounded by people going through significant mental health episodes. And so what ends up happening is they're also suffering from being in a facility that has many other people going through terrible, terrible episodes. And so look at Kalief Browder. Kalief Browder's brother yesterday at the rally talked about how his brother never had any symptoms of mental health issues, never had any signs that he was suffering from depression. And you put a 16-year-old, and let's not forget that 16 is like part of the most formative years of our identities, right? Your what you want to be in the future, your self-esteem is forming, your sexual identity is forming. So many important parts of you are forming in your adolescence. And this young man was put in jail for stealing a book bag, allegedly stealing a book bag. And he then starts trying to commit suicide after suffering in there for years and being beaten by both the people who are allegedly there to protect him, the corrections officers, and the other inmates, many of whom are mentally ill. So you are then harming so many more people who are in there, and 80% of those people are pending trial. So 80% of those people are guilty, innocent until proven guilty, so they say. But I think those are the most meaningless words in our entire jurisprudence. It doesn't feel like you're being treated as an innocent person when you're in jail.
You know, so many of the people who spoke yesterday bring up so many of the issues. I mean, you know, I grew up I was a psych major. I studied all about the abusive family system. And, you know, the issues that you guys are bringing up about Rikers is exactly the same issues that apply to, you know, kids living in abusive homes when they're trying to develop, their health's being compromised. I mean, you know, they're inheriting stress that most adults wouldn't be able to deal with, and here they are, you know, young when their bodies are still growing, their whole outlook on life hasn't even developed yet, and I've kind of come to conclude that it's all kind of part of this like environmental disaster, just like the destruction and just like the breakdown of the environment, you know, for profit.
You know, I think in some way someone is profiting. Now, I don't know if each state and each city has their own individualized story or version of how they got to a screwed up situation. Like New York and North Carolina are the only two states that treat 16-year-olds as adults, right? So that's uniquely terrible on our end. 48 other states don't do that.
I mean, that makes no sense, though. I mean, that makes no sense. I mean, so that's like saying a 16-year-old is not a 16-year-old. It's like whatever we want them to be, whatever suits our agenda.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they can go to jail for decades, but they can also be stopped and picked up by a truancy officer doesn't really sit well with me. So you can say they're supposed to be in school, and we treat them as a child when they're out on the street at 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. But we also can say any misstep you make, any bad decision you make will be held against you for the rest of your life. It's backwards and it's messed up. You know, New York doesn't have the same issues with the private jails and the privatization of different industries inside of our jails. That many other states have that problem, but we have our own problems, like the fact that hopping a turnstile is jailable for a year, the fact that just 5 years ago we were the marijuana arrest capital of the world. New York has its own problems.
How is it that you know, like this country could possibly feel proud and, you know, of being like the country with the most incarcerated people? Like, I can't, you know, that should be something we should be ashamed of. The government should be ashamed of.
So this comes back to sort of the tale of two Americas, right? So there's certain sets of populations, certain communities that will never be impacted by our mass incarceration system. They won't be impacted by our over-policing. They won't be profiled. They won't be stopped and frisked. They won't be mistreated by police. So you can see that. If you go to white affluent communities and you go to predominantly white middle-class communities, and they have very positive impressions of the entire justice system and then they tend to have gross generalizations of who goes to jail and saying, if you go to jail, you probably did something wrong. How many people think if you are arrested, you did something wrong? I'm a defense attorney. I don't assume anything if you're arrested other than you're probably black or brown.
Exactly.
That's what I assume. So there's just the people's experiences are so separate. Like, I recently moved to Manhattan, and I'm in the West Village, and I see people riding their bikes on the sidewalk, smoking marijuana in plain view, and I have yet to see anybody punished or stopped or in any way even admonished for this behavior. But in Brooklyn, when I lived in Brooklyn for about 11, 12 years, and there I saw so many children, so many people of color harassed being anywhere in the vicinity of somebody riding the bike on the sidewalk. If you're just holding an iced tea can, a cop will grab it and sniff it to see if there's alcohol in there. If you were riding your bike on the sidewalk, you'll very often get arrested and sent through central bookings and brought to jail. They'll run your name, see if you have any warrants. That doesn't happen in other communities. So that's a lot of this is you just see people having two different conversations. Like certain people, a recent study showed that white men, the majority of white men in America think they are the most discriminated against population in the country. So that's their reality. And then there's the reality, I believe that's the truth, which is our black and brown men are the most discriminated against in the country. And, but we can't ignore the fact that people are perceiving our country, our policing, our jailing, our imprisoning very differently.
And so we also interviewed, during the interview yesterday, we talked about, this supposed right to a speedy trial statute. You said we have a speedy trial statute, then why aren't we actually using it?
It's alarming. So I worked in family court for many years, and family court has a much stricter guideline about speedy trial. If you were actually detained, incarcerated as a kid for low-level crimes, you have to go to trial in 3 days. And if it's a more serious felony, you have to go to trial in 14 days. So that's fast. Honestly, at some point, as a defense attorney, I was like, that's too fast, I can't prepare. But I'd rather have a statute that was overly protective of a kid's time and life and would rather default on the side of getting them out sooner, especially if we can show that there's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But in criminal court, what can happen is there is a speedy trial standard, but what happens is the way it's calculated, the district attorney could declare they're not ready, but then at the court date, and then the judge could say, we'll adjourn this for 45 days, but they can give notice 3 days later saying we are ready, and so then those other 42 days don't get counted against them. So only 3 days actually went off the clock, but somebody's in jail for 45 days. So the way it's actually applied is meaningless, and that's how you end up with a Kalief Browder, somebody sitting in jail for 3 years, and he's declaring his innocence. And you and I, Kat, were talking about it yesterday. Like, you were saying, well, so shouldn't everybody then fight it? Like, I was talking about how brave and courageous Kalief was for insisting upon a trial, insisting upon his innocence. But how many people can do that? How many people can suffer through 1, 2, 3 years in jail awaiting their trial when most of the time they're going to get a plea offer that will allow them to get out if they were willing to take the plea? Because once you do a year in jail, many district attorneys will say, all right, well, you can get credit for that time served, and you can get out today if you're willing to plead guilty. It's hard to say no to that, even if you're innocent, because freedom is the most valuable thing we underestimate our freedom and how valuable it is until people end up in jail.
And so when you plead guilty, when you're not guilty, I mean, see, again, like that doesn't make sense to me. And how, so you're just free and that's it. Like you don't ever have to go back or like visit a judge again because you just pled guilty.
It depends. And I was just giving certain circumstances. So you can get what's called a time served offer. So time served meaning how many days you were in jail. And so that means if you just say, I'm guilty today, you would get the sentence would be, let's say you were in jail for 30 days the day of that offer. So your 30 days in jail would be your sentence. You get out today. You might have some other conditions put on your release, but generally speaking, a lot of those offers are just, yeah, get out today, and you might have to pay a surcharge and fine, but you're out. And what do you say to that person when you're like, man, if you want to go to trial, it could take another 6 to 9 months, it could take a year.
So again, like going back to the right to a speedy trial, so that you wouldn't be, or you shouldn't be waiting a long time for your trial. I mean,
So what we need a statute that actually says all time spent in jail is calculated as time against speedy clock, speedy trial clock.
Right.
That any minute, any day spent in jail should be counted. There's not this fiction of when people are, district attorneys are declaring ready, not ready, or the court is too congested. These are not excuses. Like, people's liberty is the most valuable thing. We really value people's liberty. And the way the statute is written and it's applied, it doesn't use their deprivation of liberty as a standard for how to calculate a speedy trial. It uses this different metric of when the people declare they're ready or not.
I just noticed the time. I thought we had at least another minute or so, but it is 7:30, and Kalief Roberts is going to be on in the last half an hour. He was another one of the speakers at the rally yesterday. But anyway, so what are the chances, just to kind of sum it up, I guess, of shutting down Rikers Island or raising the age or something?
I think we have a more realistic chance of raising the age than shutting down Rikers. They're both equally necessary. And just in terms of Rikers Island, to put our men and women of New York City so far away from their loved ones, so far away from their counsel, it only further diminishes their chances of getting due process and meaningful trials. And the fact that 16 and 17-year-olds are treated as adults is backwards and unacceptable. So I want both of those things to happen yesterday, and we have a popular will that should support either of those. But if I had to bet, I think we've made further progress towards raising the age. Now it's just up to the wimps in Albany to do something about it.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. I don't know, maybe we need to just get new people in Albany or something.
Hey, whatever it takes to treat our children as children, that's what it should take. We got to do it.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sandeep Kandari of you're a public defender with the Legal Aid Society.
That's correct.
Thank you
for having me, Kat.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Nothing compares, nothing compares to you.
Okay, now the last guest was also one of the speakers at the rally for ShutDownRikers and Justice for Kalief Browder, Kalief Roberts, who I believe I've interviewed before. It's been a while, at least, if not, I would say 2 years ago. He was expressing his experiences himself. He's involved with prison reform.
Please leave your message for 7182192.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. I don't know, maybe people forget. Let me try it again. And if not, I'm just going to play their talk that they gave yesterday.
Huh?
Oh, Dakeem Roberts?
Yes.
How are you?
Okay, but listen, I'm still en route. I'm actually on the train. I got about another 2 stops.
Okay, can call me back at this number, and I'm gonna play your
Okay.
talk yesterday from the rally, and then just
Okay.
Okay.
I should be ready in about 15 minutes.
okay. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, so he's still en route. So let me just bring up the talk that he gave yesterday for ShutDownRikers.
Well, I haven't been in child for a while, but I'm still a prisoner. And I've been a prisoner since I was a child. And what I mean by that is, like Kalief, I became a prisoner at the age of 16. However, unlike Kalief, I was found guilty and sentenced to a life in prison wrongfully. And because of that, I wasn't very happy with my conditions on the American state. The point of me raising this is that as a child, I was never given a second chance. And although Kalief was given a second chance because he won his case, the conditions he was placed under ultimately destroyed him. And this is why no child should be placed under those conditions. Because those conditions are not rehabilitative. They're not organized to recondition the human psychology. That's not what the U.S. prison is constructed to do. It's actually a slave system that interns over 10,000 children every year. And this is a process that has continued since the 1800s. And so what you have is you have a system under the Constitution that established a system of child slavery in which children are placed under those conditions to break them. Those conditions were intended to break me. For instance, when I went in there, within a week, I came back from court at midnight, and they had set up guys to try and rape me. Yes, they tried to have me raped. And I'm telling you, they tried to have me because there's no way those guys knew that I was coming back from court at that time of night. And I came back late. It was like 11:15. The sales was over. But they said, yeah, this guy is too tough. And it's a system that they used even during child slavery for breaking the buck. And that's what they tried to do. And when they couldn't get the prisoners to do it, they tried it themselves. 15 deep, barefoot and butt naked. Here it is, you got these 15 pigs trying to emasculate you. And why? To break the buck, you know. But it's an entire system of oppression, of slavery that has continued and has never stopped. And this is why Kalief Browder is dead.
Okay, that was a little bit of Dakeem Roberts from yesterday. Let me play some of Kalief Browder's brother, who basically led the... Sorry, I just have to find the video. Okay. This is cool.
He took his life coming home after being on Rikers and being tortured on Rikers for 3 years. They followed him home. They brought home with something like that heavy to hold on his back. As a kid, started when 16 years old. It's a lot for us to take in. And on top of that, all of us here has been 16 at least once, right? And for us to go through this, how much are we going to allow them people are doing to our future generation, to our teenagers and our family members? Me personally, I can't stand it anymore. And that's why I called this today, because I'm tired. This is a year later, and yet the government still says that they're going to do work for us and change the law. It's just lip service. Lip service that can't be taken anymore. I'm for one, fed up with it. My brother's not an anomaly. And yet, it continues to happen. We're going to have speakers right now. We're going to have some speakers of candles for us to do a candlelight vigil. Hopefully that we're going up on June 8th to Albany to see if we can push for a Kalief law, which is a law in regards to the speedy trial process. So she was denied that right that every citizen is given. And he wasn't even guilty. He was considered innocent at the end of it. But during the process, he was treated like he was guilty. He was tortured on Rikers for 3 years. He was sent to solitary confinement for over 300 days. I don't know about you and me. I know about me, but I don't know about you guys. It's more effective when it hits home, but don't let it happen to your brothers or family members. Don't let it happen to someone that you love, and then wait for it to build up. Let's stop this now and show that we're done taking the crap from the city. We have a voice. June 8th, we're going up to Albany, the capital, to help get these laws passed. But right now, today, is the vigil for Kalief, and it's to make the streets aware, make the city aware of what they did. They took my brother from me. They took someone that could have made me an uncle. They took someone that I could have made him an uncle. They took my family member, and I'm sure they took somebody in here that we know. So for that, I'm tired of sitting around waiting for someone else to suffer, and then they want attention. Let's give attention to it today. A year after the 16-year-old took his life, well, at 20 he took his life, but 16 taken from home. What were you guys doing at 16 years old? Anybody? What were you doing at 16 years old? Playing Yu-Gi-Oh, probably watching cartoons? He didn't get the chance to. When he came home, he told my mother that he just wanted to be a kid again. He wants to watch all the Dragon Ball cartoons again. He wanted to relive the years that was stolen from him. How many here can actually attest to something like that? I want the people of New York to know what it is that they did to my brother, and what it is that they do to Black and Hispanic teens, or men and women, period. So if you're with me, I want to just do a chant first. Starting with justice for Kalief Browder. Justice for Kalief Browder. Who'd they kill? Kalief Browder. Justice for Kalief Browder. What's his name? Kalief Browder. Who'd they kill? Kalief Browder. Justice for Kalief Browder. What's his name? Kalief Browder.
Okay, and until we hear from Dakeem Roberts, I'm going to play my interview with Sandeep Kandari at the rally for ShutDownRikers. What is your name?
My name is Sandeep Kandari. I'm from the Legal Aid Society.
And why did you want to be here for the 1-year anniversary for Kalief Browder?
Kalief's case, first, it's a tragedy, and we need to celebrate his life and his bravery for speaking out for all the harm he suffered. But his case really is a sample and example of all the different harms of our injustice system, and especially in New York City, how many different things we get wrong. One, why was a 16-year-old being charged as an adult? That's insane. Nobody thinks a 16-year-old is an adult. Two, why was he held in prison for 3 years pending a trial? If we have a speedy trial statute, then why aren't we actually using it? Nobody would think 3 years incarcerated is a speedy trial. Three, why was somebody being held in solitary confinement at all, let alone for 2 years? And four, why was he being held for only $3,500? He was being held for being poor. So all of these things put together show all the different symptoms of the illness within our criminal justice system. I'm here to create greater awareness about these issues, and I want Kalief's story to be known by as many people as possible.
And your t-shirt says Peace Week, New York?
Yeah, so June is Gun Violence Awareness Month, and the color orange is the peace color that we use. I am partnered up, my unit is called the Community Justice Unit. I'm the director of that unit, and we are partnered up with 18 anti-violence programs called Cure Violence programs around the city, and we are all partnered up to try to reduce gun violence in the city by helping young people and people in communities disproportionately affected with gun violence. We provide legal services to them in their community. So we go to Far Rockaway, we go to Jamaica, Queens, we go to East New York, we go to Brownsville, and we want to help those communities heal from the illness that is gun violence.
And what does your sign say?
This is actually a keen sign that I'm proud to hold up because I believe in every word of it.
79% of people on Rikers
are there because they can't afford to post bail during arraignment. How much of the justice system has become for profit?
So I recommend anybody listening to this, go to criminal court one day when you have a few hours to spare, and just pay attention to how many people go to court, and it's all about the surcharges and fines, because we use the criminal justice system as a revenue generation system, and we put it on the backs of poor black and brown people, and so that is disgusting and unacceptable. And two, the bail system was set up to be a release mechanism. Bail is a way to release people, but the way we use it, it's a way to hold people in and to coerce a plea out of them. So when you see a poor person and you say you can get out for $1,000, but you know they don't have $1,000, what you're really saying is, I'm going to hold you in jail, hoping that you're going to plead guilty at some point and you be released. That's what ends up happening. The coercive effect of being incarcerated makes innocence or guilt go out the window, and it's all about getting home to your family and loved ones.
It sounds like an extension almost of what prison is becoming. It's like people can't get out of prison a lot of times because of debt. They're actually accumulating debt while they're in jail because they're being charged for things that used to be provided, like toothpaste, flip-flops, astronomical fees to make phone calls.
New York State gets a lot of things wrong. Our state doesn't do that. It doesn't use that model of fees for everything as much as other states. We do have problems, and we do the phone calls and commissary and all those things are crooked and really rigged to charge inmates way too much money. But ultimately, our biggest issues are still that we charge 16 and 17-year-olds as adults, that we have so many poor people in jail just because they're poor, and we do it to keep them in. And so that's why 99% of misdemeanors end up in a plea, and over 90% of felonies end up in a plea. It's because so many people end up being in jail. And when I say plea, they end up being settled. Many of them get dismissed, too. So they don't go to trial, and I meet so many clients. I've been a public defense attorney for 10 years now, and so many of my clients still want to have faith in the justice system, and they talk to me about their evidence and their witnesses, and they want to go to trial. And I hate to break it to them, but we don't go to trial in New York City. Most cases will settle one way or another. If you're innocent and we can start showing that, eventually the case might get withdrawn or dismissed. But if you're guilty, then it's all about figuring out a plea. Even if you're not guilty, if you're incarcerated, we're going to end up trying to figure out a way for a lot, not me personally, but a lot of people will want to take a plea.
But isn't it the right of a person to a trial? And
Absolutely.
they're actually punishing people for wanting their right to go to trial.
That's what happened to Kalief Browder. He wanted a trial. He kept insisting on his innocence. So that's what leads to 3 years in jail, insisting on your innocence. He could have taken a plea he had dozens of opportunities to take a plea, and he chose not to. He chose to fight for his innocence. But how many people have that strength? How many people have that fortitude, right? But what if you have children? What if you have a job you can't lose? What if you have an apartment you can't lose? Kalief was 16, so in one case it's crazy and ass backwards that a 16-year-old is being held in jail, but then a 16-year-old at least doesn't have those other panoply of responsibilities that usually force a person to take a plea and get out. So that's why.
In the long run, the way he did it is the way more people should do it.
But then I will never blame a client who, after weeks or months in jail, decides they want to plea just because they want to get out. Because I think in their shoes, I often would to make the same decision. So Kalief is an amazing, strong character, and that's why we're here to celebrate him. But many people can't do that. Many people can't take 3 years of their lives.
So then Kalief has to really be the one to suffer because most people take a plea.
The system wanted him to take a plea. The system wanted him to take a plea even though he's innocent, and he kept saying, I want my trial. I want my day in court.
That would have meant that he had to say that he was guilty for something that he...
That's what a plea is. You're pleading guilty to a crime. And every day, right now, there's somebody in a courthouse pleading guilty to a crime they didn't commit.
Right.
That everybody should stop assuming that when somebody pleads guilty, they're always guilty.
Right.
They're doing it for many other reasons, like I was just describing. To get out of jail, to stop coming to court, to get a lower penalty. There's many other reasons than actually being guilty to plead guilty. And that's the red herring here, or that's the big issue that nobody really wants to talk about, the elephant in the room. That innocent people plead guilty every day, and we all know.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to now play an interview I did with another legal aid society public defender. in front of 350 J Street during a rally that they did about the Peter Liang sentencing for killing Akai Gurley. And she speaks about 16-year-olds getting a year in jail, but meanwhile, killing, you basically get arrested and home arrest like Peter Liang got.
Tell me your name.
Noha, N-O-H-A.
And you are an attorney.
I'm an attorney with the Attorneys of Color of Legal Aid. I'm a public defender.
And you were the organizer or one of the organizers for this event outside DA Ken Thompson's office over the sentencing of Peter Liang and the killing of Akai Gurley.
Yes.
Why is that?
I mean, it was kind of on two levels, right? We were protesting the sentencing recommendations that Ken Thompson had for Peter Liang, which was the 6 months of home confinement and probation. In terms of, we're talking about 6 months of home confinement and 5 years probation over a black man who was murdered, right? And so it's a protesting of just like another black man who has been murdered.
Okay, here we come. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Dakeem?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left. Just talk about who you are and what your organization is.
Yes. I'm the General Secretary of an organization I founded called Negation of the Negation. It's popularly known as the Negation. The Negation, I founded the Negation in order to basically organize an effort to abolish slavery, 21st century slavery in the United States as it's established under the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I'm also the Provisional Secretary General of the New African Communist Party. The Republic of New Africa is the 5 states of the Deep South that we have designated as compensation for the extraction of approximately 400 years of slave labor. We have a constitution, we have a Declaration of Independence, and in some areas of the world and in the United States, we're recognized as a national government.
And talk a little bit about what you were saying yesterday at the rally for shutting down Rikers Island.
Yes. Well, our primary concern with Rikers Island is that it serves no other purpose than to basically destroy the human psyche.
Did you spend time there?
Excuse me?
You spent time there?
Oh, yes. As a child of age 16, I spent approximately 2 years under pretrial detention on Rikers Island. And it was one of the worst experiences that I can attest to I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, when I was initially placed on Rikers Island, I immediately knew that some of the things that I was seeing that I would have to learn, like, for instance, when I walked into the first housing unit, there were a group of guys in the day room that were sparring. This sparring is known as a form of jailhouse fighting, which has various forms, the 52 block, the shoe shine, and when I was seeing this, I actually thought that they were practicing a form of the martial arts. So I really jumped into the fray and began practicing. And from day one, I built my ability to defend myself because I knew that this was not a day camp, that this was a very dangerous area where I would have to develop skills in order to assure my own safety. What had happened after a week or so on the island, I had went to a court date. It was actually my second court date, my first from the island. And when I returned, there was a group of inmates that were waiting for me. I mean, I didn't know this, but they were waiting for me. And they had set up a sort of a lookout, a point person, and what had happened was one of the inmates directed me to the cell of another, and I went to the cell to speak to the guy, and suddenly I was grabbed up by 4 prisoners and found myself in a fight for life. I later determined that it was actually the police that had tried to have me raped on Rikers Island. This is a common practice that goes back to slavery. And I believe it was probably noticed almost immediately that I was attempting to build skills to defend myself against any type of abuse of this sort. And so I guess whoever saw that, unless the order came from maybe like the district attorney's office, some other, like I really don't know. I just know that these guys weren't doing this for sexual pleasure. This was being done, this was the attempt to rape me was being done to denigrate, to destroy me as a human being. And of course, I wasn't going to allow it. And the old practice going back to slavery called breaking the buck. And that's when you had like aggressive male slaves who needed to be broken down. And the practice in that respect was that they would actually have other slaves rape the buck in front of the entire slave plantation. And this was done to weaken the resistance of the slaves and to basically let everyone know that this is what you have looking forward. So this practice and policy carried over, and it has been used systematically in the prisons. In fact, I just recently posted an account where guards in Georgia used the same practice and policy against a child. And apparently they actually photographed some of the abuse, which is released. So this is a common practice in the Yankee concentration camp system, which is, as I said, the tradition is old as slavery and cherry pie.
So again, we don't have that much time left. Sorry you couldn't be with me for the half an hour, but I did play your talk from yesterday. Just before we do run out of time, is there a website that or your Facebook or Twitter or something?
Could you say that again? I didn't really catch it.
Oh, do you have a website or a place where people can find you?
Sure. Well, people can find me on Facebook. They could, basically do a search. My name is Dakeem, D-A-K-E-M.
D-A-K-E-M like Mary. And
yes. And, if you really want to know more about my experiences or much of the stuff that we're attempting to organize, you could just go to my Facebook. You could friend me, or you could just review the Facebook site itself, because there's massive information.
So it's Dakeem, D-A-K-E-M like Mary Roberts.
Yeah, D-A-K-E-M.
Right. Robert.
Yeah, DKM Robert.
Thank you so much, Dakeem, and I'll see you at the next rally.
Yes, no doubt.
Oh.
Okay, thanks, and I'm sorry. What happened is today is one of my few work days, and it's so unpredictable when I go to work. I never know when I'm going to get out of there.
I hear you.
And of course, I was en route, so sorry I couldn't.
At least you made it for a few minutes.
Yeah, I didn't want to completely fail. But thank you for the interview, and thank you for spreading this information. I think it's important, and I really appreciate your work.
Oh, me too. Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, have a good night. Okay, so that does it for this Tuesday, June 7th. Happy birthday to Prince, who would have been 58 today. Please tune in next Tuesday for more of Truth in Media. Have a great night.